Sam and Mary Nelson were married September 24th, 1891. Interesting to me is that he was already known as Lucky Nelson at 26 when they married. Here's a copy of their marriage license. So how did Lucky Nelson get his nickname? Well, he fell out of a tree and the family thought he was dead. But fortunately, after several hours, he awakened, and from then on, he was known as Mr. Lucky Nelson. Samuel Lucky Nelson was a carpenter by trade. He and his sons Jeff, Ben, and Alonzo built homes and churches throughout the communities of Ozark, Washington, and Columbus, Arkansas. He was well known for and highly respected for his precise skills as a carpenter. Lucky Nelson was a man of great self-esteem and was a show-off. I'm told he would often collect the monies from their construction projects and not share any of it with his then adult sons. I'm told that one day Lucky Nelson left and never returned home to his family. Mary Stewart Nelson and Lucky Nelson had 7 children. They were Jeff, Ben, Cora, Annie, Belle, Clyde, and Alonzo. Our Coleman ancestry. We do know Peter Coleman and his parents were born in North Carolina. Peter was born about 1817. The 1880 census shows Peter Coleman living in Ozark with his second wife, Tama, and their children, Martha, Douglas, Alice, and Simon. They also had a daughter, Florence. Peter Coleman and his first wife, Mary Walker, had 2 children, Robert and John, and they're living in properties next to Peter and Tama. In 1878, the value of Peter Coleman's personal property was between $10 and $25.
Greetings, family. We are the Mullins family from Sacramento in the great state of California. My name is Carolyn Mullins.
My name is Linda Mullins Robertson.
And I am Diane Mullins.
I am Michael Mullins.
I am Dee Dee Mullins Cornelius. And I'm Kendall Cornelius.
We are the children of Ursuline Johnson Mullins, grandchildren of Mariah Coleman Johnson, great-grandchildren of Robert Coleman, and great-great-grandchildren of Peter Coleman. Grandmother Mariah was the firstborn daughter of Robert Coleman. Her mother was Eliza Leggins of Fulton County, Arkansas.
My name is Jasmine Coleman Quinterly, born in Hope, Arkansas. And that's where my relationship with my great-grandmother began, Mary Nelson. Mary Nelson was born in, we know that she lived in Hempstead, Arkansas initially. And she was married to Lucky Nelson, and to that union was born Cora and Belle, Annie, Alonzo, Lou, Clyde, and Jeff. Now, I said that Cora was born to Mary and Lucky Nelson, and that was my grandmother. If I'm recalling Cora's children, it was Roscoe and George, Fred, Calvin, Mary, Tillman, Augustus, Helene, Dorothy, who we now know as Khadijah, and then Juanita.
Hello, everyone, and many, many family members that I have not got an opportunity to meet. My name is Mary Diane Johnson Lockhart, okay? I am the granddaughter of Rosie Bell Nelson, which is the daughter of Mary Stewart Nelson and Sam Lucky Nelson.
So from what I understand, during that particular time in Hope, they had a school. Lucky Nelson had developed a store inside on their property. They had a church on their property. So from the historical information, it was a very prosperous community that they had developed, Mary and Lucky. And so when Belle came into that, did she stay in Hope up until the time, from the time she was an adolescent up until her teens, and during her time, from the time she was like an adolescent to her teen, what was going on in the country during that time? For your mother, your grandmother Belle.
Well, they were, I don't want to say inventing themselves, but they were coming out of the era where slavery had kind of ended, okay?
Reconstruction, Jim Crow,
yeah. So they were coming out of that and mainly getting their footing. Now, not everybody there had stores, and what Mary and Lucky did was exceptional. They were seeing for the future. They were seeing for their family members and those that were in that community. But when Belle, and I'm gonna say grandma because she was my grandmother, when she became that older adolescent and then a young woman, she moved away from home per se, not out of Arkansas, not out of Hope.
And I do know a whole lot about Uncle Ben. Got some great stories about Uncle Ben.
Oh, awesome.
Sure. Some great stories, because he was a horseman. He was a horseman, and I think he worked for a man named Mr. Allen. I think Allen was the name. But anyway, Uncle Ben would come around riding a horse, and he could get the horse to stretch his legs. I mean, just do all kinds of tricks on horses. But he could have him stretch his legs out like he'd almost done a split.
My name is Janice Hightower Buckner. I was born January the 12th, 1943. Mary and Lucky Nelson was my grandparents. My mother's name was Lou Clyde Hightower. She was born to Mary Nelson, the last child of Mary Nelson, out of 6. My mother died when I was 3 years old, so Mary Nelson took me in. But on the whole, me and my grandmama had a lot of fun. I used to help her pea squeals, even though I didn't know what I was doing half of the time.
You said pea squeals?
Yeah.
Now what's that?
We would we had horses, they call them horses. A lot of my cousins know what it means. The younger kids probably don't know. But we would put the quilts up on the horses and we would make quilts. And my grandmama and my Aunt Cora used to make quilts and give them to the family for Christmas gifts.
Granny, who is Mary Stewart Nelson?
No, Mary Stewart, that was my grandmother.
Mom, can you tell me a little bit about Mary Stewart and how she's related to Jeff Nelson?
Mary Stewart was my grandmother. Jeff Nelson is my father. He was the oldest child of the Stewart Nelson family.
How many brothers and sisters did he have?
Okay, he had 5 brothers. He had 1 brother and 5 sisters. Jeff was the oldest, who was my father. Ben was his only brother. Then he had sisters Cora, Annie, Belle, Clyde, and Lorenzo.
And how did Jeff Nelson, where was he born and raised at, and how did he get to Flint, Michigan?
My father was born in Hope, Arkansas in 1903. He finished school and he moved to Flint in 1929. He was a factory worker. He worked in the foundry in Buick. In 1933, he met my mother, who was a native of Flint, Michigan. They were married in 1934.
So what was my grandmother's name and maiden name?
My mother's name was Esther Sanders, and then she became Esther Nelson when she married my dad, Jeff Nelson. And to that union, 2 children were born. My name, I'm Winona. I was the oldest, and my sister is Josephine. And those were the 2 that the Jeff Nelson and Esther had. And in my family, when I married Clyde Lee, and in my family I had 4 children, and then I have 7 grandchildren, and I have 13 great-grands. My great-grands, whose names I'm going to call, the oldest was Eric, then Devon, Riani, Autumn, Lionel Jr., Clyde Lee the 4th, Hayes, Dean, Zaya, Carrington, Shaylin, Isaiah, and Kendall. And then I have 1 great-great-granddaughter who is Angel.
Oh, wow, beautiful. So going back to Granddad Jeff, how, when he moved to Flint, Michigan, he moved here by himself?
He was the only Nelson that came to Flint, and he came to work at Buick factory because in Michigan the jobs were real plentiful, and the men could come in and have jobs in Flint.
They were hiring a lot of African Americans in Flint, as well as anybody that wanted a job, they was hiring.
Right, correct.
So did Granddad Jeff, Grandpa Jeff, did he have any relatives that lived in Flint, Michigan?
He had no relatives that lived in Flint, but when he moved to Flint, he moved with a couple, the Harringtons, Katie Harrington and John Harrington. And John Harrington worked in the factory with him, and they had like a boarding house where a lot of, like 5 of the factory workers that worked in Buick lived, and he was one of, and he lived in the house with them.
So that part of town in Flint, and we're speaking directly about Flint, Michigan, when he moved here, could African Americans or blacks live anywhere? Well, they used to call them Negroes at that time. Could they live anywhere in the city of Flint, or did they have a specific area that they had to?
Okay, now my family, and I'll say 50% of the blacks lived in what we call the St. John area. We lived on the St. John side of Flint, Michigan. That was in the northeast side of Flint, Michigan. And it was a completely black neighborhood. There was another black neighborhood on the industrial side. And I'll say 50% of the blacks lived there. And then there was a neighborhood on the south side of Flint. But most of the factory workers where my father worked in Buick lived on the north side.
Was that part of town self-sufficient? Did they have their own grocery stores, hardwares, meat markets, cleaners, funeral homes?
In Flint, and I'm gonna say on the St. John side, the whole neighborhood, it was probably 15 streets. We had we had 2 grocery stores. We had a cleaners. We had a drugstore. We had a dime store. We had an ice cream parlor. We had a St. John Center where the youth could play, dance, and we had a skating ring. So the St. John area and the north side area was pretty self-sufficient. We did not have to leave St. John. We had 2 schools, 2 elementary schools in that area. It was Fairview School and Roosevelt School, where where all of the children went to school.
Were most of the teachers African American at that time?
I, in my 2nd grade, had my first African American teacher. That was Marion Coates, and she was the first black teacher in that area.
Oh, wow. So tell me a little bit about Jeff Nelson. What did he have any hobbies? Did he have anything special about him that he did? Did he have any trades that you know of?
Okay, now my father, Jeff Nelson, was the coach of a baseball team, and the team's name is on the pictures. The name of the team,
Red Devils.
The name of the team was the Red Devils. We belonged to Shiloh Missionary Baptist Church, and when it was established and formed, he was one of the carpenters that helped make the benches and the pews and stuff for our church. And that was in 1935, 1940.
So tell me a little bit about my grandma Esther.
My mother, Esther Nelson, was born in Norfolk, Virginia. Her father was a professor, and he taught school.
What was his name?
And his name was Hezekiah Sanders. That she moved to Flint she was one of the first students in Northern High School, and she was in the first graduating class from Northern High School. And then after graduation, she was hired and worked at AC Spark Plugs for 35 years.
It was interesting that you brought up Grandma working at AC Spark Plugs. She told me a story about how she got hired.
Oh, now I don't know the story.
Her story, the story that she told me was because I got to be a supervisor in the plant. But the story that she told me was that her and this guy by the name of Al Reeves would go out and stand at the HR office every day to try to get into and to get a job, because they was hiring people during the war, and that they was hiring anybody, especially women. And so they opened it up to hire anybody, but they had people that would come in and they would stand at the door to get in, and they would have all these white people standing behind them, and they let them in, and they would be first in line every day. They did this for 6 months. And finally one day she said the man came out there and he told them, he said, if y'all are out here, when I come back out here today, I'm going to let y'all come in. And so he let them come in at about 4:30. They got hired, and they was the first 3 black people that got hired in Delphi. What was called AC Spark. So that's the story my grandma told me. So, you know anything about Hezekiah Sanders?
Hezekiah Sanders, my grandfather, was a professor and a teacher, and he taught college in Cairo, Illinois.
Cairo, Illinois. Okay.
But
Is that where he met Grandma?
No, that is where he met my mother's mother, and then when he retired from the school in Illinois, he came to Michigan, but the colleges in Michigan were not hiring black professors, so he was not hired. He was not given a position in Michigan as a professor in college.
So, Mom, if 30 years from now, and you having this conversation with C for little L, Hayes, what would you want them to know about you?
Okay, I was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. I graduated from Flint Northern High School, and I attended Eastern Michigan College in Ypsilanti.
Okay, so how do you feel about, I'm going to ask two. So the first is, how do you feel about being able to celebrate?
I'm excited. And I'm so glad to see everybody. I'm always excited to see everybody.
Okay, and then the last question, the last comment would be any last thoughts or additional comments that you would like to make about family or anything, whatever you want to say, about your favorite nieces.
Don't hate it.
I want to talk about my favorite nieces. I got 2 favorite nieces. Dawn.
That's right. Dawn is the first one. That's correct.
Florinda.
Thank you. Yes, we paid her to say that. And you better not take it out the video. That's not gonna make the cut.
It's not.
You better make it. I'm gonna act a fool at the reunion if you take it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Okay. So did he have any hobbies, social activities, or affiliations to any organization?
He played baseball. I know that.
He was in the Negro League.
He was in the Negro League.
What would you like for your grandchildren or just your family members? How would you like for them to see you 100 years from now?
How would I like for them to see me?
Or remember you?
Or remember me? Remember some of the things that I did. I didn't do much though, so.
Your cooking, your singing?
Well, I could do my singing and my cooking mainly because I like to cook.
Christmas Eve.
Oh yeah?
Yep. Remember my Christmas Eve dinners. What else did I do?
I like to hear you singing, and my favorite song that I ever heard you sing was How I Got Over when I was a little girl, because I thought you was a star singing in Shiloh. She was like, how could I got over? I was like, that's fine, Johnny. Yep, so yeah, that's my favorite song.
All right, and the last question is, what does your sister mean to you?
Everything. Everything. There's only 2 of us. And you know, Mom used to tell us, we ain't got to like each other, but we got to love each other. And she means everything to me.
Don't make me cry.